The champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes in a hurricane, and I stood there watching my wife laugh at another man's joke. Not just any joke, one about me. "So, Derek," Brandon Kent drawled, his voice carrying that prep school smugness that made my teeth ache. "How does it feel to always be second place in every possible way?" The corporate crowd erupted in polite laughter. Camille, my wife of 12 years, giggled behind her manicured hand like she was still in high school. The sound cut through me sharper than any blade ever could. I took a slow sip of my beer, the only non-champagne drink at this tech company soiree, and let the silence stretch. Brandon's smirk widened. He thought he'd landed the perfect blow. "Well," I said, setting my bottle down on the marble countertop with deliberate care, "I suppose it's better than being first at being a complete waste of oxygen." The laughter died. Brandon's face flushed red above his designer collar. Camille shot me a look that could have frozen the Atlantic. "Derek," she hissed under her breath, "behave yourself." Behave myself, like I was some unruly child she'd dragged to the grown-ups table. I'd been hearing that phrase a lot lately, usually right after Brandon made one of his clever little comments about my blue-collar job as a building inspector, or my lack of an MBA, or the fact that I drove a 10-year-old pickup truck instead of a Tesla. The thing about being underestimated your whole life is that people stop paying attention to what you're actually capable of. They see the flannel shirt and the calloused hands, and they think they've got you figured out. Brandon Kent, with his silver tongue and his corner office, had no idea what kind of mistake he was making. "Actually," I continued, my voice calm as a lake before a storm, "I was wondering something, Brandon. How does it feel knowing that pretty soon I'll be the one calling the shots around here?" The silence that followed was beautiful. Pure, crystalline confusion. Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "What are you talking about?" Camille whispered, her champagne glass trembling slightly in her grip. I smiled. Not a nice smile. The kind of smile that made people nervous without knowing exactly why. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough. Both of you." I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there with their mouths hanging open. Behind me, I could hear the whispered conversations starting up again, faster and more urgent now. Good. Let them wonder. The truth was, I didn't have any grand plan yet. But watching Brandon's face crumble, seeing that moment of uncertainty flicker across Camille's perfect features, it felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in months. I made my way through the crowd of tech executives and their spouses, nodding politely at people who barely registered my existence. These were Camille's people now, had been for the past 3 years, ever since she'd clawed her way up to senior vice president at Meridian Technologies. I was just the plus one, the husband who didn't quite fit in their world of startup jargon and stock options. The elevator ride down to the parking garage gave me time to think. Camille would be furious when she got home. She'd lecture me about embarrassing her in front of her colleagues, about how important these relationships were for her career. She'd use that tone she'd perfected, disappointed but patient, like she was dealing with a particularly slow student. But something had shifted tonight. Maybe it was the way she'd laughed at Brandon's joke. Maybe it was the way she'd positioned herself just a little too close to him during his presentation earlier. Or maybe it was the text message I'd glimpsed on her phone when she'd left it on the kitchen counter that morning. A message from B that said, "Can't wait for tonight." I'd assumed it meant the company party, now I wasn't so sure. My truck started with its usual reluctant growl. The parking garage was full of sleek sedans and luxury SUVs, and my Ford F-150 looked like a wolf among poodles. I liked that image. Wolves were patient hunters. They knew how to wait for the right moment to strike. The drive home took me through the heart of our coastal main city, past the trendy restaurants and boutique shops that had sprung up like mushrooms after the tech boom. Camille loved this new version of our hometown. She said it had character now, which was her way of saying it finally had enough expensive places to impress her colleagues. I preferred the old version, the one with dive bars and fishing boats, where people said what they meant and meant what they said. But that world was disappearing, pushed out by people like Brandon Kent and their endless appetite for transformation. Our house sat on Elm Street, a Victorian-era beauty that we'd bought back when Camille was still climbing the corporate ladder and I was making decent money as a senior building inspector. It had good bones, as I like to say. Solid foundation, quality craftsmanship, built to last, unlike some things in my life. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, looking up at the windows. Most of them were dark. Camille wouldn't be home for hours. These company parties always ran late, especially when Brandon was holding court. Inside, the house felt different somehow. Colder. I'd been noticing it for weeks now, this subtle shift in atmosphere, like the walls themselves were keeping secrets. I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator and headed down to my workshop in the basement. This was my sanctuary, the one place in the house that was completely mine. Workbench, tools, half-finished projects, everything exactly where I'd left it. No corporate efficiency experts had reorganized my space to maximize productivity. The beer tasted better down here. Everything did. I was contemplating whether to start sanding the rocking chair I'd been building when I heard Camille's phone buzzing upstairs. She'd left it on the kitchen counter again, something she'd been doing more often lately. Usually she was glued to that device like it was a life support system. The buzzing stopped, then started again. Someone really wanted to reach her. I climbed the stairs slowly, telling myself I was just being helpful. Good husbands checked on their wives' phones when they forgot them, right? Made sure there wasn't some emergency that needed immediate attention. The screen lit up as I approached. 3 missed calls and 2 text messages, all from B. My finger hovered over the screen. Camille had changed her passcode recently, said it was for security reasons after some article about corporate espionage, but I'd watched her type it in a dozen times without really thinking about it. Muscle memory was a wonderful thing. Brandon. Of course. The messages opened like a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. Where are you? I've been waiting in the room for 20 minutes. Room 412. Don't keep me waiting much longer. The timestamp showed they'd been sent an hour ago, right around the time I'd left the party. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I scrolled up through their conversation history, my hands surprisingly steady. Weeks of messages, months maybe, hotel addresses, meeting times, things that made my stomach clench and my vision narrow to a pinpoint of white-hot clarity. Can't wait to feel you again. Derek's working late tomorrow. Come over. You're so much better than him at everything. That last one was from Camille. I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode if I moved too fast. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too bright. I needed air. The back porch overlooked our small yard, with its carefully maintained garden and white picket fence. Camille had insisted on the fence when we'd moved in, said it made the place look more established. Now it just looked like a cage. The anger came in waves. First, the hot rush of betrayal, then the cold calculation of someone who just realized they'd been played for a fool. How long had this been going on? How many of their friends knew? How many times had I shaken Brandon's hand at company events while he was planning his next rendezvous with my wife? But underneath the anger was something else, something that felt almost like relief. For months, I'd been trying to figure out why Camille seemed so distant, so critical, so eager to point out my shortcomings. I'd wondered if I was losing my mind, imagining problems that didn't exist. Turns out my instincts had been right all along. I wasn't going crazy. I was just married to a cheater. The sound of a car in the driveway snapped me back to the present. Camille's BMW, purring like a satisfied cat. I glanced at my watch. 11:30. The party had officially ended at 10. I slipped back inside and returned her phone to its exact position on the counter, then grabbed another beer and settled into my recliner in the living room. By the time she walked through the front door, I looked like any other husband waiting up for his wife to come home from a work function. "Hey," she said, kicking off her heels with obvious relief. "Sorry I'm so late. You know how these things go." "No problem," I replied, taking a long pull from my beer. "How was the rest of the party?" "Oh, you know. Same old corporate nonsense. Brandon gave another one of his speeches about quarterly projections." She paused, studying my face. "You really embarrassed me tonight, Derek. That comment you made, people are going to remember that." "Good," I said. "Maybe it'll give them something interesting to talk about for once." She sighed, that patient, long-suffering sound I'd grown to hate. "We need to discuss your behavior at these events. I can't have you." "Where's your phone?" I interrupted. The question caught her off guard. "What?" "Your phone. You left it here." Her hand went instinctively to her purse. Then her face went pale. "Oh, I didn't even notice." "Must have been some party," I said, "to keep you so distracted." She recovered quickly. I had to give her credit for that. You know me. When I get talking shop with the team, I lose track of everything else. The team, was that what she was calling Brandon now? "Anyone try to reach you while you were gone?" "I don't think so. Why?" I shrugged. "Just wondering. You usually panic when you're separated from that thing for more than 5 minutes." "Well, I was busy." She grabbed the phone from the counter, her fingers flying over the screen. I watched her face change as she read the messages, saw the exact moment she realized what I might have seen. "Derek," she said carefully. Did I what?" "Nothing. Never mind." She forced a smile. I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed. Sweet dreams, I said. After she'd gone upstairs, I sat in my chair and finished my beer, thinking about wolves and patience and the art of waiting for exactly the right moment to strike. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. My sister Rachel poured coffee like she was conducting an orchestra. Precise, dramatic, with just enough flair to make you forget you were sitting in a dive bar at 7 in the morning. The Lantern had been serving breakfast to fishermen and shift workers for 30 years, and Rachel had been behind the bar for the last 5 of them. You look like someone ran over your dog, she said, sliding a mug across the scarred wooden surface. What's eating you? Camille's having an affair. Rachel's hand froze halfway to the coffee pot. Then she set it down with deliberate care and fixed me with the kind of stare that had intimidated bullies and bad boyfriends since we were kids. You sure? Saw the messages on her phone last night. She's been meeting Brandon Kent at hotels. Brandon Kent. Rachel's voice could have stripped paint. That slimy piece of work who's been making jokes about you at every company function for the past year? That's the one. She grabbed a bar towel and started wiping down glasses with violent efficiency. Rachel had always been protective of family, but betrayal turned her into something primal and dangerous. What are you going to do? I'm working on it. Derek. She leaned across the bar, her voice dropping to a whisper. Tell me you're not planning something stupid. Define stupid. Anything that involves the police, lawyers, or hospital visits. I held up my hands in mock surrender. Nothing like that. I'm thinking more along the lines of social consequences. Rachel's expression shifted from concern to something that looked almost like anticipation. What kind of social consequences? The kind that make people think twice before they decide to humiliate someone they think won't fight back? She grinned, the same expression she'd worn when we were kids, and she was about to get us both in trouble with some elaborate prank. I'm listening. I need information about Brandon, about Camille's office politics, about who knows what and when. You hear everything that happens in this town. Flattery will get you everywhere. Rachel poured herself a cup of coffee and settled in for a proper conversation. What do you want to know? Start with Brandon. What's his reputation like outside the office? Well, he's got money, obviously. Drives that fancy Tesla, lives in the new luxury condos down by the waterfront, but he's not as popular as he thinks he is. How so? For starters, he's cheap. Tips like a college student and always has some excuse for why he can't pick up a round. Plus, he's got wandering hands when he's had a few drinks. Most of the waitresses around town know to avoid him. Interesting. I filed that information away for later use. What about at work? Any enemies there? Oh, plenty. You know Melissa Grant, Camille's friend from HR? I nodded. Melissa had been to our house for dinner parties, had complimented Camille on her decorating, and asked me polite questions about my job while clearly not listening to the answers. She's been spreading rumors about Brandon for months, says he's been cooking the books, inflating his department's numbers to make himself look good for the board. Is it true? Rachel shrugged. Does it matter? In a place like this, rumors become truth pretty quickly if enough people want to believe them. She had a point. Small cities were like echo chambers. Whisper something in the right ear, and by evening it would be accepted fact in 3 different neighborhoods. Anyone else I should know about? Tommy Morrison's been asking about you. Tommy. We'd grown up together, played football in high school, stayed friends even after he'd joined the police force and I'd gone into construction. He was one of the few people in town who remembered me from before I became Camille's husband. What's he been asking? Just checking in. Said he hadn't seen you around much lately, wondered if everything was okay. Perfect. Tommy had always been the kind of cop who understood that sometimes justice and the law weren't exactly the same thing. If I needed someone to look the other way while I bent a few rules, he'd be my first call. You want me to reach out to him? Not yet, but keep him in mind. Rachel refilled my coffee and leaned back against the bar. So what's the plan? And don't tell me you don't have one. I can see those gears turning. Phase 1 is information gathering. I need to know everything about Brandon's business dealings, his personal habits, his weaknesses. Phase 2 is leverage, finding something I can use to make his life complicated. And Phase 3? Phase 3 is making sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of people they really are. Public humiliation. The most effective kind of revenge there is. You can recover from financial problems, relationship issues, even legal trouble, but once your reputation is destroyed in a place like this, I let the sentence hang in the air. Rachel nodded slowly. You're going to need help. I was hoping you'd say that. What do you need me to do? Listen, watch. Keep your ears open for anything useful, and maybe start asking a few casual questions about Brandon's business practices. I can do that. The lunch crowd loves to gossip about the tech company, folks. She paused, studying my face. Derek, are you sure about this? Once you start down this path, there's no taking it back. They made that choice for me when they decided I was too stupid to figure out what they were doing. And Camille? What happens to her in all this? The question hung between us like smoke. I'd been trying not to think too hard about that part of the equation. 12 years of marriage didn't just disappear, even when it was built on lies. She made her choice, I said finally. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Rachel nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She'd always liked Camille, had been excited when I'd first brought her around for family dinners. The betrayal cut her almost as deeply as it cut me. All right, she said, but promise me something. What? Promise me that when this is all over, you'll still be the same person. Revenge has a way of changing people, and not always for the better. I thought about that as I drove to work. Was I the same person I'd been yesterday? Or had discovering Camille's affair already started some fundamental transformation? The building I was inspecting that morning was a new office complex going up on the east side of town. 30 stories of glass and steel, designed to house the overflow from the tech boom. I spent the morning checking structural integrity, reviewing electrical systems, making sure everything met code. It was satisfying work. Clear standards, objective measurements, problems that had definitive solutions, unlike marriage, apparently. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Nina from Meridian HR. Could we meet for coffee? I have some information you might find interesting. Nina. I remembered her from company parties. Nervous, fidgety, always looking like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. What could she possibly want with me? I texted back, when and where. The Grind, 2 p.m. Come alone. The Grind was a coffee shop in the downtown area, far enough from Meridian's offices to avoid casual encounters with Camille or her colleagues. I arrived 10 minutes early and found Nina already there, hunched over a laptop in a corner booth. She looked up when I approached, and I was struck by how tired she seemed. Dark circles under her eyes, hair that looked like she'd been running her fingers through it all morning. Derek, thank you for coming. What's this about, Nina? She glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. I know about Brandon and Camille. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting something like this. Knowing that other people were aware of the affair made it real in a way that the text messages hadn't. How long have you known? Months. I handle the expense reports for executive travel. Hotel rooms, restaurant charges, conference fees that don't match up with any actual conferences. She pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. It's all in there. I opened the folder and found myself looking at copies of credit card statements, hotel receipts, travel vouchers, a paper trail of infidelity, documented in corporate expense reports. Why are you showing me this? Nina's laugh was bitter. Because I'm tired of cleaning up after people who think the rules don't apply to them. Brandon's been using company funds to pay for his affairs for over a year. Not just with Camille, there have been others. Others. Of course there had been others. Men like Brandon didn't suddenly develop a conscience about adultery. What do you want in return? I want him gone. Brandon's been making my life miserable ever since I started asking questions about the expense reports. He's threatened to have me fired, said he'd make sure I never worked in this industry again. So this is revenge for you too. Call it whatever you want. The point is, we both want the same thing. I closed the folder and studied Nina's face. She was scared, but there was something else there too. Determination. The look of someone who'd been pushed too far and was finally ready to push back. What exactly are you proposing? I keep feeding you information about Brandon's activities, financial irregularities, policy violations, anything that might be useful. In exchange, when you make your move, you make sure this information gets to the right people. The board of directors. Among others. The IRS might be interested too, depending on how you want to play it. I thought about Rachel's warning, about revenge changing people. But looking at Nina's tired face, at the evidence of Brandon's corruption spread across the table, I realized I wasn't the only one who'd been underestimated. All right, I said, but we do this carefully. No rushed moves, no sloppy mistakes. Agreed. We shook hands across the table, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about all the people who'd been stepped on by men like Brandon Kent, all the quiet indignities and casual cruelties that powerful people inflicted because they thought no one would ever call them on it. Phase 2 was officially underway. That evening, I came home to find Camille in the kitchen, preparing what looked like an elaborate dinner. Candles on the table, wine breathing in a crystal decanter, the good china set out like we were expecting company. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "Do I need an occasion to cook for my husband?" The word husband sounded strange coming from her lips, like she was trying on a costume that didn't quite fit anymore. "Not at all. It smells great." She'd made my favorite, pot roast with all the trimmings, the kind of meal that took hours of preparation, the kind of meal someone made when they were feeling guilty about something. "How was your day?" she asked as we sat down to eat. "Same as always, checked some buildings, made sure they weren't going to fall down on anyone." I took a bite of the roast. It was perfect, of course. Camille had always been an excellent cook when she put her mind to it. "How about you?" "Oh, you know. Meetings, conference calls, the usual corporate nonsense." "See much of Brandon today?" The question was casual, but I saw her fork pause halfway to her mouth. "He was in a few of the meetings. Why?" "Just curious. You two seem to work together a lot lately." "He's my boss, Derek. Of course we work together." "Right. Of course." We ate in silence for a few minutes. The candlelight flickered across Camille's face, and for a moment I could see the woman I'd married 12 years ago. Young, ambitious, full of dreams about the life we were going to build together. When had that woman disappeared? When had she been replaced by this stranger who could lie to my face while serving me pot roast? "Derek," she said finally, "about last night, the comment you made at the party. What about it? People are talking. Brandon's been getting questions about what you meant. Good. Let them wonder. This isn't a game. These people control my career. Maybe you should have thought of that before you started screwing your boss." The words came out before I could stop them. Camille's face went white, then red, then white again. "What did you say?" "You heard me. Derek, I don't know what you think you know, but room 412. Can't wait to feel you again. Derek's working late tomorrow. Come over." I recited the text messages from memory, watching her face crumble with each word. "Should I go on?" She set down her fork with trembling hands. "You went through my phone?" "You left it on the counter. Again." "That doesn't give you the right to—" "To what? To find out my wife is cheating on me? To discover that she's been lying to my face for months while making me feel like I'm going crazy?" Camille started to cry. Not the dramatic sobbing of someone truly remorseful, but the calculated tears of someone who'd been caught and was looking for a way out. "It's not what you think." "Really? What is it then?" "It's complicated. Try me. I'm smarter than you give me credit for." She wiped her eyes with her napkin, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "Brandon and I, we have a connection, an intellectual connection that you and I have never had." "Is that what you're calling it?" "You don't understand the pressure I'm under at work, the expectations, the competition. Brandon gets that. He understands my world. And I don't. You're a building inspector, Derek. You check to make sure walls are straight and wiring is up to code. I'm trying to build something bigger than that." There it was, the truth she'd been hiding behind all the lies and excuses. I wasn't good enough for her anymore. My blue-collar job, my simple pleasures, my lack of an MBA, none of it measured up to the life she wanted. "So you decided to upgrade?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like? Explain it to me in terms my simple mind can understand." She stood up from the table, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I don't have to justify myself to you." "Actually, you do. We're married, remember? Or did that slip your mind while you were having your intellectual connection with Brandon? This conversation is over." "No, it's not. We're just getting started." But she was already walking away, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown timer. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the slam of our bedroom door. I sat alone at the table, surrounded by the ruins of what had once been my marriage, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. The last vestiges of doubt, the final hopes for reconciliation, evaporated like steam from the cooling pot roast. Camille had made her choice. Now it was time to make mine. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Rachel. "Game on." Her response came back immediately. "About time." Brandon Kent's Tesla Model S purred into the Meridian Technologies parking garage at exactly 8:15 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past week. I'd been tracking his movements since my conversation with Nina, learning his patterns, mapping out his routine. Punctuality was apparently one of his few virtues. I watched from my position behind a concrete pillar as he climbed out of his car, straightened his Italian suit jacket, and strode toward the elevator like he owned the building, which, given his position as senior vice president, he practically did. What Brandon didn't know was that his car now carried a small passenger, a Bluetooth tracking device I'd attached to the undercarriage 3 days ago. The kind of thing you could buy online for $50 and install in under 30 seconds. Amazing what technology could accomplish these days. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Lunch crowd is buzzing. Word is spreading about Brandon's expense account irregularities. Perfect. Phase 2 was proceeding exactly as planned. The beauty of a small city like ours was that information traveled fast, especially when it was juicy enough to warrant repetition. Rachel had been carefully seeding rumors about Brandon's financial practices, always framing them as concerns rather than accusations. I heard someone in accounting was asking questions about executive travel expenses. Funny how some people can afford 5-star hotels on business trips while the rest of us get stuck at the Holiday Inn. Makes you wonder what kind of business requires that many overnight stays in Portland. Nothing actionable, nothing that could be traced back to her or to me. Just enough doubt to make people start paying attention. I climbed into my truck and headed across town to my next inspection, a residential renovation in the historic district. The work gave me time to think, to plan my next move while my hands stayed busy checking electrical boxes and measuring load-bearing walls. Around noon, my phone chimed with a notification from the tracking app. Brandon's car was on the move, heading away from downtown toward the waterfront district. I checked the map. He was driving toward the Harbor View Hotel. Interesting. The Harbor View was where he'd been meeting Camille for their afternoon encounters. But according to her calendar, which I'd been monitoring through our shared family account, she was supposed to be in meetings all afternoon. Maybe Brandon had found someone new to entertain. I finished up my inspection and drove toward the hotel, parking across the street with a clear view of the entrance. Brandon's Tesla sat in the valet circle, gleaming like a black diamond in the afternoon sun. 20 minutes later, he emerged from the lobby with a woman I didn't recognize, tall, blonde, wearing the kind of business suit that cost more than most people made in a month. They stood close together, her hand resting on his arm, both of them laughing at some private joke. I snapped a few photos with my phone's zoom lens, making sure to capture their faces clearly. Nina had been right. Camille wasn't Brandon's only extracurricular activity. The woman climbed into a red BMW and drove away. Brandon retrieved his Tesla and headed back toward downtown. I gave him a 5-minute head start, then followed at a safe distance. He parked in his reserved spot at Meridian and disappeared into the building. Probably had a meeting to attend, reports to file, employees to intimidate. Just another day at the office for a man who thought the rules didn't apply to him. I drove to the Lantern and found Rachel wiping down tables in preparation for the evening crowd. The lunch rush had ended, leaving the place quiet except for a couple of regulars nursing beers at the far end of the bar. "You look pleased with yourself," she said when she saw me walk in. "I am. Brandon's been busy today." I showed her the photos on my phone. Rachel studied them with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. "Who's the blonde?" "No idea yet, but Nina might be able to help with that." "Speaking of Nina, she called here looking for you about an hour ago. Said it was important." I found Nina's number and called her back. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with anxiety. "Derek? Thank God. We need to meet. Something's happened." "What kind of something?" "Not over the phone. Can you come to my apartment? I'll text you the address." The address turned out to be a modest complex on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where young professionals lived while they saved money for something better. Nina's apartment was on the second floor, overlooking a parking lot filled with economy cars and student vehicles. She opened the door before I could knock, her face pale and drawn. "Come in, quickly." The apartment was small but neat, decorated with the kind of furniture you bought when you were just starting out and didn't have much money. Nina gestured for me to sit on her couch while she paced back and forth across the living room. "Brandon knows," she said without preamble. "Knows what?" "That someone's been asking questions about his expense reports. He called me into his office this morning and accused me of spreading rumors." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. I denied everything. But he didn't believe me." She stopped pacing and fixed me with a desperate look. "He's going to fire me, Derek. He as much as said so." "On what grounds?" "He doesn't need grounds. This is an at-will employment state. He can get rid of me for any reason or no reason at all." She was right, of course. Brandon had enough power within the company to make Nina's life miserable, and enough connections to make sure she had trouble finding work elsewhere. "When?" "Soon. Maybe as early as tomorrow. He's meeting with HR in the morning to discuss personnel issues." I thought about the photos on my phone, about the tracking device on Brandon's car, about all the information Nina had already provided. We were close, so close to having everything we needed to bring him down. But if Nina got fired before we could make our move, we'd lose our inside source. We need to accelerate the timeline, I said. What do you mean? I mean, we stop playing defense and go on the attack. Tonight. Nina's eyes widened. Tonight? But we're not ready. We don't have enough. We have enough to start the avalanche. Sometimes that's all you need. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos from the Harbor View Hotel. Recognize the woman? Nina studied the images, then gasped. That's Jennifer Walsh. She's on the board of directors. Perfect. A married board member having an affair with a senior executive. The kind of scandal that could bring down both of them if it became public knowledge. Here's what we're going to do, I said. You're going to send an anonymous email to the other board members tonight. Include copies of Brandon's questionable expense reports, documentation of his policy violations, and these photos. They'll know it came from someone inside the company. I'll have to let them know. By tomorrow morning, Brandon will have bigger problems than figuring out who leaked the information. Nina bit her lip, clearly torn between fear and the desire for revenge. What if this backfires? What if they just cover it up? They won't. There are too many people involved, too many witnesses. Once this gets out, it'll take on a life of its own. I could see her wavering, caught between the safe path of keeping quiet and the dangerous road of fighting back. Nina, I said gently, what's the worst thing that can happen? Brandon fires you? He's already planning to do that anyway. At least this way, you go down swinging. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photos on my phone. Then she nodded, her jaw setting with determination. All right, let's do it. We spent the next hour crafting the email, making sure it was professional but damning, factual but inflammatory. Nina had access to internal company directories, so we were able to send copies to every board member, several department heads, and key personnel in accounting and legal. The subject line read, Urgent, Executive Misconduct and Financial Irregularities. Send it, I said. Nina's finger hovered over the mouse button for a moment, then clicked. The email disappeared into cyberspace, carrying with it enough explosive information to reshape the entire power structure at Meridian Technologies. It's done, she whispered. Now we wait. I drove home through the evening darkness, feeling like a man who'd just lit a very long fuse. By tomorrow morning, Brandon Kent's carefully constructed world would start crumbling around him. The only question was how much collateral damage there would be. Camille's car was in the driveway when I arrived. She'd been working late every night since our confrontation, probably spending time with Brandon while they figured out how to handle the situation. Well, they were about to have a lot more to handle. I found her in the living room, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and her laptop. She looked up when I walked in, her expression guarded. How was your day? She asked. Productive. Yours? Fine. We stared at each other across the room, two people who'd once shared everything, now reduced to polite small talk and careful evasions. Camille, I said finally, you should know that things are about to get complicated. What do you mean? Let's just say that Brandon's past is about to catch up with him. You might want to start thinking about how much of your career you want to tie to his. Her face went pale. Derek, what have you done? Nothing illegal, nothing unethical. I've just helped some information find its way to the right people. What information? The kind that makes board members ask uncomfortable questions. Camille set down her wineglass with shaking hands. You're trying to destroy him. I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I'm just making sure the truth comes to light. This will ruin me too. You know that, right? My reputation, my career, everything I've worked for. You should have thought of that before you decided to have an affair with your boss. She started to cry again, but this time the tears looked genuine. Not the calculated manipulation of someone trying to avoid consequences, but the real anguish of someone who'd just realized how much they stood to lose. Please, she whispered. Whatever you've set in motion, you can stop it. We can work this out. We can go to counseling, start over. It's too late for that. It's never too late. We've been married for 12 years, Derek. That has to count for something. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for a moment I could see the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who could lie and cheat and manipulate without apparent remorse. It did count for something, I said, right up until you decided it didn't. My phone buzzed with a text message. Rachel, word's already spreading. Whatever you did, it's working. I looked back at Camille, still crying on the couch, and felt something that might have been pity. She'd made her choices, just like I'd made mine. Now we both had to live with the consequences. You might want to update your resume, I said, and went upstairs to bed. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. The first email arrived in my inbox at 6:47 a.m., forwarded from an address I didn't recognize with the subject line, "Holy crap, did you see this?" Attached was a screenshot of a local news website's headline, "Meridian Technologies Executive Under Investigation for Financial Misconduct." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. The story was brief, just a few paragraphs citing anonymous sources and internal company documents, but it was enough to confirm that Nina's email had found its target. By 7:15, my phone was buzzing with text messages from Rachel, Tommy, and half a dozen other people who knew about my connection to Meridian through Camille. The news was spreading faster than wildfire in August. Camille was still asleep beside me, her face peaceful in the morning light. She had no idea that her world had just imploded. I slipped out of bed quietly and went downstairs to make coffee. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Greeley from next door retrieving her morning paper. She spotted me and waved, then held up the newspaper with obvious excitement. Even at this distance, I could see Brandon's headshot on the front page. My phone rang. Rachel. "Have you seen the news?" "Just woke up to it. How bad is it?" "Bad. The story's been picked up by 3 different outlets already, and it's only been live for an hour. People are talking about nothing else." "What are they saying?" "That Brandon's been stealing from the company for years, that he's been having affairs with multiple employees, that the whole executive team is corrupt." Rachel's voice carried a note of awe. "Derek, this is bigger than we expected." She was right. What we'd intended as a targeted strike against Brandon had apparently opened a floodgate of accusations and revelations. Other people had been waiting for someone to speak up, and Nina's email had given them permission to come forward with their own stories. "Any word from Camille's office?" "Tommy drove by there about 20 minutes ago. Says there are news vans in the parking lot and security guards turning people away. Place is in complete lockdown." I heard footsteps on the stairs, Camille, finally awake. Her hair was messy and she was wearing the old bathrobe she'd had since college, the one that made her look young and vulnerable. "I have to go," I told Rachel. Camille wandered into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Who were you talking to?" "Rachel. She was calling about—" Camille's phone erupted in a cacophony of rings, chimes, and notification sounds. She stared at it in confusion, then picked it up and watched her face change as she scrolled through dozens of missed calls and messages. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no, oh no, oh no." "I tried to warn you," I said. She looked up at me with an expression of pure panic. "Derek, what have you done?" "I told you. I made sure the truth came to light. This will destroy everything. My career, my reputation." "Your reputation was destroyed the moment you decided to cheat on your husband with your boss. I just made sure everyone else knew about it." Camille's phone rang. Brandon's name appeared on the screen. "Answer it," I said. "I'm curious to hear what he has to say." She stared at the phone like it was a poisonous snake, then reluctantly swiped to accept the call. "Hello?" Even from across the kitchen, I could hear Brandon's voice, high-pitched, frantic, barely coherent. Camille's face went from pale to green as she listened. "I don't know," she said. "I don't know who could have—" "Yes, I saw the news. No, I haven't talked to anyone from the board." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Brandon apparently giving Camille instructions about damage control and media management. When she finally hung up, she looked like she might vomit. "He wants me to come in early, help him figure out how to handle this." "That seems like a bad idea." "Why?" "Because associating yourself with him right now is like grabbing onto an anchor while your ship is sinking." Camille stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. Her lover was being investigated for financial crimes, her company was in crisis, her marriage was over. Everything she'd built her life around was collapsing simultaneously. "You planned this," she said finally. "All of it." "I planned to expose Brandon's corruption. Everything else is just a natural consequence of his actions. And mine? And yours." She nodded slowly, like someone accepting a terminal diagnosis. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" "To get dressed. If I'm going down fighting." I had to admire her determination, even if it was misplaced. Camille had always been a fighter. It was one of the things I'd originally loved about her. Unfortunately, she'd chosen to fight on the wrong side of this particular war. After she left for the office, I drove to the Lantern for breakfast and found the place buzzing with conversation. Every table was occupied, every bar stool filled with people discussing the morning's revelations. Rachel was working frantically to keep up with orders, but she flashed me a quick grin when she saw me walk in. "Local celebrity," she announced to the room. "Derek Sanders, the man who brought down Brandon Kent." A cheer went up from the crowd. People I barely knew were patting me on the back, buying me drinks, treating me like some kind of folk hero. It was surreal and gratifying and slightly overwhelming all at once. "Speech," someone shouted from the back of the room. "Yeah, give us a speech." I held up my hands for quiet. The room gradually settled down, all eyes focused on me. "I'm not a hero," I said. "I'm just a guy who got tired of watching powerful people think they were above the rules. What happened this morning isn't about revenge. It's about accountability." More cheers. Someone started a chant of, "Derek, Derek," that made me feel simultaneously proud and embarrassed. Tommy Morrison appeared at my elbow, his police uniform drawing respectful nods from the crowd. "Can I talk to you outside?" he asked quietly. We stepped onto the sidewalk, away from the noise and excitement of the bar. "Hell of a thing you've done," Tommy said. "Is that your professional opinion or your personal one?" "Both. Brandon Kent's been a problem in this town for years. Someone needed to take him down a peg." "But?" Tommy smiled. "But nothing. As far as I can tell, everything that happened was completely legal. Anonymous tips to corporate boards, leaked documents that were already semi-public record, rumors that happened to be true. None of that breaks any laws." "Good to know. Just be careful, Derek. Men like Brandon don't go down quietly. He's going to be looking for someone to blame, and you're the obvious target. Let him look. I'm not hiding." "I know you're not. That's what worries me." Tommy's warning proved prophetic. Around noon, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Derek Sanders?" The voice was unfamiliar, professionally smooth. "Who's asking?" "My name is David Chen. I represent Brandon Kent in certain legal matters. I think we should meet." "I don't think we should." "Mr. Sanders, my client is prepared to make you a very generous offer in exchange for your cooperation in resolving this unfortunate situation." "What kind of offer?" "The kind that could set you up comfortably for the rest of your life. All we need is for you to publicly retract certain statements and clarify that any information you may have shared was taken out of context." I almost laughed. Brandon was trying to buy his way out of trouble, just like he'd probably done dozens of times before. "Tell your client I'm not interested." "Mr. Sanders, I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation. My client has significant resources and influential friends. It would be unfortunate if this matter escalated beyond its current scope. Now the threats were starting, right on schedule." "Are you threatening me, Mr. Chen?" "I'm simply pointing out that legal proceedings can be expensive and time-consuming, even when the plaintiff's case lacks merit. It might be in everyone's best interest to resolve this matter quietly." "Here's a counteroffer," I said. "Tell Brandon that if he comes anywhere near me or my family, I'll make sure every news outlet in the state gets copies of the photos I took of him with Jennifer Walsh yesterday afternoon." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm not sure what photos you're referring to." "Room 412 at the Harbor View Hotel. Your client and a certain married board member who's supposed to be reviewing his conduct. I'm sure her husband would find them very interesting." Another silence, longer this time. "I'll relay your message to my client." "You do that?" I hung up feeling like I just won the first round of a boxing match. Brandon was scared, desperate enough to try bribery and intimidation. That meant the pressure was working. The afternoon brought more developments. Nina called to tell me she'd been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation, but that several other employees had come forward with their own stories about Brandon's misconduct. The local newspaper published a follow-up story with quotes from anonymous Meridian employees describing a culture of harassment and financial impropriety. By evening, the story had gone regional. News vans from Portland and Boston were parked outside Meridian's headquarters. Brandon's name was trending on social media. The avalanche I'd started with Nina's email had become a full-scale landslide. Camille came home after dark, looking like she'd aged 10 years in a single day. Her clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smeared, her usually perfect hair hanging limp around her shoulders. "How bad?" I asked. "The board's called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Brandon's been suspended pending a full investigation. Half the executive team is lawyering up." She collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table. "I've been reassigned to a different department, reporting to someone I've never even met." "Could be worse." "How could it possibly be worse?" "You could be unemployed, or under criminal investigation, or married to someone who's about to be indicted for embezzlement." She looked at me with something that might have been gratitude. "You could have included me in all this, made it look like I was part of Brandon's schemes." I thought about it. "Why didn't you?" I considered the question. Why hadn't I tried to destroy Camille along with Brandon? She'd betrayed me just as thoroughly, hurt me just as deeply. Because despite everything, I don't actually want to see you suffer. I just want you to face the consequences of your choices. Camille nodded slowly. I'm going to resign. From Meridian? From everything. The job, the marriage, this life I've been trying to build. It's all built on lies anyway. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Maybe back to Boston. Start over somewhere nobody knows about any of this. That might be for the best. We sat in silence for a while, two people who'd once planned to spend their lives together, now discussing the logistics of their separation. It should have been sadder, more emotional. Instead, it felt like a business meeting. Derek, she said finally, I want you to know that I never meant for things to happen this way. I know. Do you hate me? I thought about that question for a long time before answering. No, I said finally. I don't hate you, but I don't love you anymore either, and I don't think I can forgive you. I understand. She went upstairs to pack, and I sat alone in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of my marriage ending. Drawers opening and closing, hangers scraping across closet rods, the soft thud of suitcases being filled with the remnants of a life. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Brandon just showed up at the bar, drunk as a skunk and looking for a fight. Thought you should know. I smiled. Phase 3 was about to begin. The lantern was packed when I arrived, but the usual cheerful buzz of conversation had been replaced by something tenser, more expectant. Brandon Kent sat alone at the far end of the bar, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained, his usually perfect hair disheveled. 3 empty whiskey glasses sat in front of him, and he was working on a 4th. Rachel caught my eye and nodded toward the back exit. She'd positioned herself strategically, ready to call for help if things got out of hand. Several of the regulars had also noticed Brandon's presence and were watching him with the wary attention of people who sense trouble brewing. I ordered a beer and found a table where I could observe without being obvious about it. Brandon was muttering to himself, occasionally gesturing at his phone or glaring at other patrons. He looked like a man on the edge of a complete breakdown. Excuse me. I looked up to find a young woman standing beside my table. She was maybe 25, professionally dressed, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she was working up courage for something difficult. Are you Derek Sanders? Depends who's asking. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I worked at Meridian, in accounting. I gestured for her to sit down. What can I do for you, Sarah? I wanted to thank you for what you did, for finally speaking up. I'm not sure I know what you mean. She glanced around nervously, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. Brandon Kent has been harassing women at the company for years, making inappropriate comments, touching people without permission, using his position to pressure people into situations they didn't want to be in. Did you report it? I tried. We all tried. But HR always found excuses to dismiss the complaints. Said there wasn't enough evidence, or it was just a misunderstanding, or maybe we were being too sensitive. Her hands clenched into fists on the table. He made my life miserable for 2 years, made me dread coming to work every morning. I'm sorry that happened to you. The point is, what you did today, exposing him, making people pay attention, it gave the rest of us permission to come forward. There are at least 6 women who've contacted lawyers since this morning. Maybe more. I thought about Nina, about the fear in her voice when she'd called me, about all the other women who'd been suffering in silence while Brandon used his power to intimidate and abuse them. Good, I said. He should face consequences for what he's done. He will now, thanks to you. Sarah stood up, then paused. Just be careful. He's been drinking all afternoon and asking questions about you. He's not thinking clearly. As if summoned by her words, Brandon suddenly stood up from his bar stool, swaying slightly as he scanned the room. His eyes found mine across the crowded bar, and his face twisted into an expression of pure rage. He started walking toward my table, pushing through the crowd with the aggressive determination of a drunk man looking for a fight. Conversation stopped as people noticed his approach. The entire bar seemed to hold its breath. Derek Sanders, Brandon said when he reached my table, his words slurred but still carrying that familiar arrogance. The man of the hour. Brandon, you look like hell. Funny, I wonder why that might be. He grabbed an empty chair from a nearby table and sat down uninvited. You've had quite a day, haven't you? Destroying people's lives, ruining careers, playing God with other people's futures. I didn't destroy anything. I just made sure the truth came to light. The truth. Brandon laughed bitterly. You want to know the truth? The truth is you're a pathetic little man who couldn't handle the fact that his wife found someone better. The bar had gone completely quiet now. Everyone was listening, waiting to see how this confrontation would play out. Someone better? I kept my voice calm, conversational. You mean someone who steals from his company and harasses his female employees? I never stole anything. The expense reports say otherwise. So do the hotel receipts, the restaurant charges, the mysterious conference fees that don't correspond to any actual conferences. Brandon's face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Just like I know about Jennifer Walsh and probably half a dozen other women you've been manipulating and exploiting. You're fishing. Am I? Then why did your lawyer call me this afternoon trying to buy my silence? Brandon's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected me to know about that. Here's what I think happened, I continued. I think you got used to taking whatever you wanted. Money, women, respect, because nobody ever stood up to you. You surrounded yourself with people who were too scared or too dependent on you to fight back. But you made one mistake. What mistake? You underestimated me. Brandon slammed his fist on the table, making our drinks jump. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won some kind of victory here? I think I've evened the score. The score! Brandon's voice rose to a near shout. You want to talk about scores? Let's talk about how your wife came to me begging for attention because you couldn't satisfy her. Let's talk about how she told me you were boring, pathetic, a disappointment in every possible way. The words hit their target, just as Brandon had intended, but instead of the pain or rage he was expecting, I felt something else entirely. Pity. Is that really the best you can do? I asked. After everything that's happened today, after your entire world has collapsed around you, the only weapon you have left is trying to hurt my feelings about my failed marriage. Brandon stared at me, apparently confused by my lack of reaction. Here's the thing, Brandon. You're right about Camille. She did say those things about me. She did choose you over me. And you know what? I'm grateful. Grateful. Because if she hadn't, I never would have discovered what kind of man you really are. I never would have learned about the women you've been abusing, the money you've been stealing, the lives you've been destroying. Camille's betrayal led me to something much more important than saving my marriage. It led me to stopping you. Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Around us, the bar patrons were nodding and murmuring approval. Someone started clapping, and others joined in until the entire room was applauding. You're finished, Brandon said desperately. I have friends, connections, resources. I'll make sure you never work in this town again. With what influence? You've been suspended from your job, you're under investigation for financial crimes, and half the women in your company are preparing to sue you for harassment. What exactly are you going to threaten me with? Brandon stood up abruptly, his chair falling backward with a crash. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to hit me. But then Tommy Morrison appeared beside him, his police uniform and calm demeanor immediately diffusing the tension. Evening, gentlemen, Tommy said pleasantly. Everything okay here? Just having a conversation, I replied. Mr. Kent, Tommy continued, I think maybe you've had enough excitement for one day. Why don't I give you a ride home? I don't need a ride from you, Brandon snarled. Actually, you do. You're in no condition to drive, and I'd hate to have to arrest you for public intoxication on top of everything else you've got going on. Brandon looked around the bar, taking in the hostile faces, the obvious contempt of people who'd finally seen him for what he really was. His shoulders sagged as the fight went out of him. This isn't over, he said to me. Yes, it is, I replied. You just don't know it yet. Tommy escorted Brandon out of the bar, leaving behind a room full of people buzzing with excitement and satisfaction. Rachel appeared at my table with a fresh beer. That was beautiful, she said. I've never seen anyone deflate that fast. He's done. Even if he somehow survives the investigation, his reputation is destroyed. No one will ever take him seriously again. What about Camille? She's leaving, going back to Boston to start over. Rachel studied my face. How do you feel about that? Relieved, mostly. It's time for both of us to move on. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and free drinks. People I barely knew were treating me like a conquering hero, sharing their own stories about Brandon's arrogance and misconduct. It seemed like half the town had been waiting for someone to take him down. I finally made it home around midnight to find Camille's car gone from the driveway. Inside, the house felt different, emptier, but also somehow cleaner. She'd left a note on the kitchen table. Derek, I've taken what I need and left everything else. The house is yours. I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you can forgive me. C. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash, then walked through the rooms that had once been our shared space. Camille had been thorough. Her clothes, her books, her decorative touches were all gone. What remained was just a house, waiting to be turned back into a home. My phone buzzed with a text from Nina. "Brandon's been arrested. Financial fraud charges. Thought you'd want to know." I smiled and typed back, "Justice served." Outside, the city was quiet, settling into the kind of peaceful sleep that comes after a long day of reckoning. Tomorrow there would be more developments, more revelations, more consequences for the people who'd thought they were untouchable. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. The underdog had finally had his day. 3 months later, I was standing in the parking lot of Meridian Technologies, watching a crew remove Brandon Kent's name from the building directory. The company had survived the scandal, barely, after a complete reorganization and the installation of new leadership. Brandon himself was awaiting trial on multiple charges, his legal troubles compounded by a growing number of civil lawsuits from former employees. "Quite a sight," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Jennifer Walsh approaching, looking considerably less polished than she had in the photos I'd taken at the Harborview Hotel. The investigation had cost her both her board position and her marriage, but she seemed to be handling the consequences with more grace than her former lover. "Ms. Walsh." "I wanted to thank you," she said. "What you did, exposing Brandon's corruption, it was the right thing to do." "Even though it cost you everything?" She smiled ruefully. "Everything I had was built on lies anyway. Better to lose it all and start over with a clean slate than to keep living a fiction." It was an attitude I could respect. "What will you do now?" "I'm starting my own consulting firm, helping companies develop better oversight and accountability measures. Turns out there's quite a demand for that kind of expertise these days." She walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the satisfying sight of Brandon's name being consigned to the dumpster where it belonged. My phone rang. "Rachel, you coming to the grand reopening tonight?" The Lantern had been renovated over the summer, transformed from a simple dive bar into something more upscale while still maintaining its neighborhood character. Rachel had been promoted to manager, and the place had become something of a local institution, the bar where Derek Sanders had faced down Brandon Kent and won. "Wouldn't miss it?" "Good. Tommy's bringing his new partner, and Nina's driving up from Portland. Should be quite a celebration." Nina had found a new job with a nonprofit organization, doing the kind of work that actually mattered to her. She'd also become something of a whistleblower advocate, helping other people find the courage to speak up about corporate misconduct. "I'll be there." I hung up and took one last look at the Meridian building. The company would survive, probably even thrive under its new leadership. The people who'd been hurt by Brandon's actions were finding ways to rebuild and move forward. Justice, in its imperfect way, had been served. As for me, I'd discovered something unexpected in the aftermath of my revenge. I was happier alone than I'd been in years. The house on Elm Street had become a true home again, filled with projects and possibilities instead of secrets and resentment. I'd even started dating, nothing serious yet, but the prospect of finding someone who actually appreciated me for who I was seemed less impossible than it once had. The divorce had been finalized the previous month, with Camille keeping her promise to make the process as simple as possible. She'd sent a card from Boston, where she was apparently doing well in her new job with a small marketing firm. I'd wished her luck and meant it. Some people might call what I'd done to Brandon an act of revenge, and maybe they'd be right, but it felt more like justice to me, the kind that comes when someone finally decides that enough is enough and refuses to be pushed around anymore. The underdog's reckoning was complete, and the foundations for something better had been laid. As I drove toward the Lantern and an evening of celebration with people who'd stood by me when it mattered, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the last laugh really is the best laugh of all.